Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. It is September 5th, 2018. My name is Matt Leshper with 1836 Realty and Property Management in beautiful Austin, Texas. We've got a guest today from the Fort Worth and Dallas region, we'll say, who's an expert contributor for us. It is about 11:30, so we're going to do our best to kind of start promptly on time. If you guys have any questions, just for the housekeeping items, feel free to list those questions on the sidebar. We do have a poll going if you would like to answer that. Any of the questions that we don't get to or address during the session, we'll be sure and leave some time for at the end so we can come back to those. Again, my name is Matt Leshper in Austin, Texas. I am a real estate broker, professional real estate inspector. Been doing business in one way or the other in the real estate community for about 12 years in Austin. We have a real estate brokerage firm, but we focus primarily on acquisitions and management of long-term real estate investments. Along my journey, a couple years back, I met this gentleman in Fort Worth, Steve Fithian, and Steve has a beautiful office in a prime time location among a stellar staff and just a whole lot of experience, to be honest with you. And so he does things a little but he also does some of the things that we do. Steve, if you don't mind, just telling the folks kind of what companies you have, what those specific companies do, and then I'll just kind of prompt you for some questions about your background so we don't make you remember everything all at once.
All right, very good. Well, we have a commercial brokerage company, SVN Trinity Advisors. SVN formerly was Sperry Van Ness, and now it's known as SVN. We've been affiliated with them for roughly 14 or 15 years. Prior to that, I was an independent broker. And so SVN specializes in commercial brokerage and leasing. We also have a commercial management company, and we currently manage roughly about 4 million square feet. And we have a residential management company called Frontline Property Management. And we have a small brokerage firm that specializes in small income properties, single family, duplexes, and fourplexes. And then we do syndications of commercial properties. Sorry.
On the SVN, just to make sure we give people a proper background, and if they have any questions, they can always chime in. What was the benefit for you personally to go from an independent broker, because some of these viewers today will know a buddy who's in the business, to something like SVN and a partnership with that corporation? What were the benefits that you got out of that?
The competition in commercial brokerage is very strong. And so when I would do a proposal for a property, I would have to do each one custom, and I would take Excel and Word and different softwares to come up with a package. And competing with some of the large nationwide companies that have full marketing departments, I found it difficult to compete. In addition, there's a lot of subscriptions that are required to be able to provide the research data, and those subscriptions are very expensive. And by joining a national firm, I was able to leverage the cost of those subscriptions. And then frankly, to be able to do business across the nation, 1031 exchanges, exchanging into properties in and out, and having a network of brokers that I could rely upon. So those were the main things that I was looking for in joining a national firm.
Yeah, I don't think that most people realize that commercial and residential are not just different animals. They may not even be in the same zoo. I mean, residential this is my opinion, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty within the lines. You know, there's some very specific parameters because you're dealing with people's homes and the federal government through HUD and some regulations. Commercial is kind of the Wild West, and you can do almost anything you want because it's not related to some of these government-backed loans, which have to be repackaged or whatever they may. Is that close to accurate?
Yes and no. The closest thing to single-family homes, of course, would be multifamily, and some people consider multifamily not a part of commercial, but most commercial practitioners, say that multifamily is within the commercial. So on the residential, the multifamily side, you do still face the same types of regulations that you're referring to on the single family side. Other types of products, retail, industrials, probably not as much scrutiny as like you're saying as you have with the housing. But there are still laws that you have to follow, and there's there's local custom and protocol, but it is probably less regulated than what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think really having somebody with boots on the ground in the city or your fellow brokers with SVN is really helpful to you, because people do things differently across the nation. Even if it's similar laws, it's not always done the same way.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, I'm doing this webinar from South Carolina, and I'm actually in the office of an SVN managing director that I've known 10 or 12 years. So he opened up his office so I could do the webinar. So I have relationships literally all over the country of people that I can count on like that.
Yeah, the consumer doesn't really have that as a resource. So it's imperative, whether they read a book and think that we in real estate are good or bad, they need those resources, whether they like it or not. And having somebody with decades of experience and those connections enables you to get an answer with one phone call instead of searching for it in Google and hoping that it's correct. So, well, tell me this. What was your career path like? How did you end up where you are? Because you've got some residential, you've got some commercial. You guys acquire and dispose of both. How did you end up here?
I grew up in Southern California, and when I was in college, I just got the bug for real estate. I mean, in Southern California, everybody's made money in real estate, and you just can't, you can't ignore it. So I fell in love with real estate in college, but I needed a practical degree. So I received an accounting degree, and then I went to work for a Big Six accounting firm. So I was working as an accountant, but all of my available time, I was out looking at real estate and, just reading everything that I could on real estate. And then I bought my first investment property 6 months out of college. And that was my start as an investor. And then I just kept investing in property. I wanted to get closer to real estate. So I was looking for a job within real estate. And so I went to work for Coldwell Banker, originally as an assistant controller on their residential brokerage division, and then later became a controller of their residential brokerage division. And so that gave me exactly what I wanted, a lot of exposure to real estate. And then I got licensed in 1986, and then finally had enough confidence in 1988 that I started as a broker, opened up my own shop in 1988 in Southern California, and then moved to Texas in 1990 for opportunities. And so my company's been located in Texas since 1990.
They say you're supposed to take a job for what you learn, not what you make, so that it'll propel you further down the road. And it sounds like you got in with those guys and really had a lot of exposure to things and people that you wouldn't get if you just said, I'm going to be an agent and go hit the streets.
It was invaluable. The exposure that I had, like you said, and actually became the signatory broker on one of their companies. And I told them that, I'm in accounting, but I want to learn the real estate business. And they were very, very good to me in teaching me the business.
Nice, nice. Well, what does a normal day look like for you? So you're wearing all these hats. Today you're in South Carolina, you're traveling to another state. Eventually you got to get home for the family in Fort Worth. What does a normal day look like so these people can get to know you a little bit?
Well, really what I've focused on the last 2.5 years are syndications. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking for deals, looking for a value add deal or a property that's mismanaged, something that I feel that I can put together a business plan and then turn that property around. So that's what I spend the majority of my time on. And I have really good support systems. So I have agents in our office that are doing regular listings. And then I have my management staff that can manage the assets that we acquire. But I get turned on by looking for deals and putting a deal together.
That's awesome. All right, so we're going to come back to the syndications and consortiums and all that. Let's first talk about commercial investing, because that's the title today, and we want to make sure we don't miss out on that for anybody. What qualifies? We're going to start 101. What qualifies as commercial?
Well, I would say anything other than a 1 to 4. So residential is a 1 to 4. So a single family, a duplex, triplex, fourplex, that is strictly residential. Everything other than that would fall under the commercial. So including land, vacant land, large tracts, lots, industrial, retail, office, self-storage, all those would be under the commercial umbrella.
And you work or have worked or have have seen all of those different types, or are there people that really underneath you specialize in each one, like storage units or industrial? Because industrial, I mean, goodness, you could take that and go for a mile.
Yes, in our office, commercial brokers tend to specialize. I've been in the business a little over 30 years now, so I've brokered really every product type. I mean, hospitality, self-storage, land, retail, office, industrial. And what I tend to do is follow more real estate cycles. So for example, I'm personally focused on industrial right now. I really like multi-tenant industrial. And so that's mainly what we are acquiring currently, unless I stumble across an asset that is just an outstanding opportunity in another field.
So consumer out there, they know you, maybe they know you from Fort Worth, or they've met you along the way, or they're just joining us today for the first time. They think commercial is the way to go. And for whatever reason, right, wrong, or indifferent, doesn't matter. How do they get started? Where does a single individual or family, how do they even get into commercial? I mean, are they looking for the vacant strip mall with one door on it? Are they looking for an apartment complex? What are most people getting in on? What type, what price point? What does it look like for the entry level?
Well, first I would say that the easiest type of real estate to invest in is a single family. I mean, it just has so many positives. And I know that's not a forum today, but I'll just say that unfortunately, commercial, it is tougher to get into. The pricing is higher, and the financing is totally different than residential financing. So it is more challenging to get in. You need more liquidity. And we could get into why that is, but I would just summarize it to say that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, vacancy time is much more. So it requires a lot more liquidity. And some of the, I mean, it's not, you don't have to be a brain surgeon, but there are a lot of complicated things that you have to learn, the way the leases are set up, percentage rent, and different things like that. So commercial, I mean, I love it, but it is a little bit more difficult to get into.
So what would somebody, if they just decide, hey, Steve, I've got some family money for whatever reason, and I'm interested in commercial, but they don't have $50 million. Most people don't come to the table with that, and boy, if they do, they should probably not, because that's, putting it all on one gamble is a good way to lose it. So let's start slow and learn. Where would somebody start if they had $250,000, $500,000 liquid?
Well, syndications, I think, is a great place for somebody to start. In a syndication, you could invest as little as $25,000, $50,000, and then you're able to leverage off of the other investors in the syndicate. So let's say they're purchasing a $5 million asset. That asset is large enough that it can have professional management. It would typically have better quality tenants. The financing for that asset would be better. So in my opinion, that's a great way to learn commercial investing and to be able to see how it operates, see the experts that are running it, and really to not have the risk that they would have if they went out and spent that entire amount on one commercial asset.
So what I'm hearing you say, just because people come from all different walks of life, is just because you've got some money and just because the property is for sale doesn't mean you should think you're going to go buy that strip mall and manage it yourself as if you've been doing this for 40 years.
I would agree. I mean, you mentioned $250,000, $500,000. I mean, you can buy commercial properties for that, but depending on the area that you're in a lot of areas, $250,000 or $500,000 in a commercial property would be an older property or maybe a less desirable property, or it could be a very nice property, but maybe it's a single tenant property. I personally favor more multi-tenant properties. In my opinion, there's less risk associated with them. So it would be difficult to buy a multi-tenant property with $250,000 or $500,000. So that's why I was saying there's a lot of benefits in investing together and being able to control a larger asset.
It sounds like patience pays off too. You touched upon the quality of the property, and I think a lot of people are more concerned about control than quality. And we can make an argument, I guess, both ways. Are you better off with total control and poor quality, or almost no control but great quality? Because that quality will pay for management services that are experts, instead of you swimming upstream managing a property that's below an average grade per se, and fighting tenants, fighting the city on all the violations, fighting everybody the whole way, and being up to your neck with the initial investment. So what I'm kind of hearing from you is it's much better if you're an entry level to really play with others to gain some experience and knowledge and insight, and take your time.
I certainly believe that. Where commercial is very much like residential is the quality of the properties. And so on residential, if you're buying a frame house in a challenging neighborhood, the price level is much lower. Usually the rent compared to the price is phenomenal. So on paper, it looks like it's a fantastic return. And
right,
some people it could be. I mean, if you're a local person and you're all over it, you're doing your own maintenance, you're just the type of person that's just every day in it, well, yeah, you can get a good return. But for most of us that don't have the time or the expertise to do that, it is a lot more challenging if you're out of the area or whatever when I was on the residential, I would always advise people to be with good school districts, be with a brick home, 3 or 4 bedrooms. And those same qualities, in my opinion, they transfer to commercial. And messing around with a low quality property, it's just a lot of heartache. And in my mind, it's just not worth it.
We had Pete Newbig on from Houston Empire Property Management last month. And he was talking multifamily, not commercial, not resident, but multifamily. And that was exactly what he was saying. It looks good on paper, but what you're not seeing is that you have to pack a weapon to go collect rent, because they won't even mail you the rent. And so at that point, who's going to want to rent the property? It's just not worth it. You're not going to have great quality tenants. It's not going to go up in value because the whole neighborhood's probably in a decline. I agree with you. Buying something that's more sensible with others is better than having the full control and being the one digging your own grave with the money. So what does typical financing look like? Let's say that people have, let's step it up a little bit so we can at least have the example. Let's say they have $1 million, but they don't want to go in with others. What does financing look like in commercial versus residential?
Okay. You really need to determine your business plan for the asset and what the holding period is going to be, because the financing on the commercial, you're really locked into it. And so there would be what a lot of people refer to as bridge financing, or short or midterm financing versus permanent financing. But permanent financing in the commercial world is typically 10 years at the max. So it's certainly not like the 30-year financing that you're getting on the residential side. So the permanent financing of 10 years, that would be for a property that's stabilized and that you intended to keep for that full 10-year period. You can get a fixed rate, you can get non-recourse financing when you go that permanent route. But the negative that you have is you can't exit the property very easily. They have very, very stringent prepayment penalties. They're called defeasance or yield maintenance. And then a lot of them are completely locked out for the first 2 years. So because of the lockout provision, because of the extensive yield maintenance or defeasance, you need to keep it for the entire time. So if the property you want to be able to sell it in under that 10-year period, then you would typically look more at bridge financing. Bridge financing typically has recourse provisions to it, but you have the flexibility of exiting 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You can still get fixed rate interest, but it would probably be fixed for only the first 3 years, and then it would typically go variable. And then I would also say that if you're a first-time investor and you're buying your rental homes, you can easily get Fannie Mae financing. Whereas the first-time investor on the commercial, they will probably have a lot more challenging time getting a commercial loan without expertise and a track record.
Who do you go to if you want a commercial loan? Do you call up Bank of America and you just say, hey, I found this great property. I've got some cash in my pocket. I want to buy it. Who are the players in that area?
Bank of America does make loans on commercial properties, but they make very, very large loans. So I would never think of going to Bank of America. The smaller banks, your local, your regional banks, for the bridge financing, I found that those are your best lenders. And certainly if you have a relationship with them. So for example, my business accounts, I put my business accounts with lenders that have a history of making commercial loans. And then I have very good fortune in getting commercial loans from those same banks. But then when I start going out of state, I need to widen my umbrella and looking. And so I've established relationships with mortgage brokers. And so the mortgage brokers, they specialize in knowing what type of lenders to go to, even for the specific asset class or for a geographic reason. So I do both. I establish relationships with local lenders, and then I've also established a relationship with a mortgage broker that I know I can go to, for the financing.
So if you were going to buy a property in Columbus, Ohio, but your office is in Fort Worth, you're going to go to someone local in Columbus and try to pull resources from SVN or someone else that you know to connect you to make that deal happen. Is that close to right?
Let's be very specific. We recently closed on some transactions just out of Cincinnati. And so I did several things. I contacted my local mortgage broker in Dallas. I also contacted SVN advisors in that local market. I got referrals from SVN, and then I also worked with the mortgage broker. The mortgage broker actually found a couple local lenders that were interested in the loans. And this particular property, the business plan, it was more for a shorter term, was a value add. So we could not put permanent financing on it. The lender that actually came through, you're on a commercial loan, the time frames are very, very specific, and there's huge ramifications if you don't meet the closing dates. So the lender that actually came through was sourced through the mortgage broker.
So, Austin's a city of about 1 million. I would say metro 2 million. But what I'm kind of hearing from you and what I'm seeing in my own practice is there's not 10,000 options for you out here. There's some good options, depending on who you're connected with, who you know, and what you can pull together. But this isn't something that you Google and pick the top 3 and make some phone calls and make happen. You're going to have to actually work with some people and a quality team to put all this together.
No, that's actually correct. I mean, we're in a great economy, and so there's a lot of active investors out there, and so the returns have come down. So finding a deal that gets a hopefully better than average return, or hopefully even a lot more than an average return, that's an art. That is a lot of time and effort goes into that. Then secondly, once you find that asset, you have to know how to put the deal together. And so the financing is very integral there. And then of course you have to have the equity side of it as well. And then, let's say that you did put all that together, then you have to have the team to implement the plan and to manage, get it leased, and have the vision to operate that property for the long term.
These don't sound like they're closing in 30 days.
No, not typically. We have had to do that. And when I say had to do that, meaning the competition was so stiff for the deal that we were required to close in that time frame. But there are a lot of moving parts on a commercial property. We haven't even talked about the due diligence, just checking out the asset itself, checking out the zoning. So I would say that the average transaction right now is more a 90-day period, but most of the ones that we're doing are say 60 to 90 days as far as the closing period.
Not horrible though. That's still a reasonable timeline for all the pieces that you have in play.
Well, it is fast, and that's with having a team environment. There's what the permanent loan is called. A lot of them are CMBS. Commercial mortgage-backed security, and those loans take a little bit longer to put together, and so you have to have a seller that's willing to allow you that time to put that loan together.
Nice, nice. Well, we've talked about commercial investing in general, and that is our topic. Let's talk a little bit about group investing, if that's okay, because from your and my relationship, this is one of the things that I've heard you mention several times, and always in a positive light. You mentioned this as if it's, I don't want to say the gold standard, but something that consistently functions well. What is group investing? What are consortiums? What are syndications? Tell our viewers today kind of what you know about those so they can better understand that terminology.
Okay. It's very simple. It's just a group of people that get together with a common goal. And that goal, in this case, is specifically to purchase real estate. And you have a leader, and that leader is either called a promoter or it could be the manager of the LLC. Some people refer to it as a syndicator. And so the role that individual plays is he's the expert in locating the property, operating the property. And so the other investors are typically passive, but they don't have to be. And so it could be you and three of your buddies, and all four of you could be very, very experienced, but you're wanting to leverage your time and your financial resources to come together and operate an asset. It is very important to have an agreement, and so you need to spend money and time with an attorney to draft a very good agreement, but it has a lot of very favorable consequences for those that are involved.
So when you're getting this many people together, I think it's even hard to find out what they all want to eat for lunch and agree upon it. So how do you get a group of unrelated people from different backgrounds and different geographies to agree upon what they're going to buy, what the investment looks like, how it's going to be managed, and not have conflict?
Well, I can tell you how I do it, but there's various ways you can do it. The way I do it is I'm looking for an asset that I want, frankly, and that I feel has advantages. Of course, I have been investing for 30 years, so I certainly know what is attractive to me, but I've also dealt with a lot of investors. So, there's some investors that want cash returns. There's some that want the value add more for the capital gains. So I find an asset with a particular quality, and so I put together a business plan for that. So I'm looking for investors that want to invest in a specific plan. So, let's just make up a deal, property A. And so property A is stabilized. It's producing very good cash flow. The cash flow has been very reliable. So that's a good asset for those people that want to get a return on a consistent basis. So those are the investors that I'm looking for that particular asset. Contrasted by opportunity B. Opportunity B is a property that's 50% occupied, but it's in a good area. There's a lot of market demand. The property, for whatever reason, whether it be poor management or maybe the ownership group was undercapitalized, and so they haven't been able to do the tenant improvements, the leasing commissions to get that property, in a good occupancy. So property B, it won't produce current cash, but yet you're really going to significantly add to the income, which is going to make the value of the property go up in a reasonably fast period of time. Let's say 2 to 3 years, you're going to significantly add to the value of the property. So that's a value add property, but it's a different type of an investor that is patient and can wait for a return, but the end return is going to be pretty healthy. So again, I would target a totally different investor for property B than I would for property A.
So what I'm hearing from you related to the investors themselves is that you really have probably a database of people who have a little bit of disposable income. Maybe they're millionaires, maybe they're ordinary folks, but they save real well. And they're looking for a place to put their money somewhere besides Wall Street. And they actually want a tangible asset, and you're staying in touch with those people to find something that fits them when you find it. Is that close?
That's exactly correct. And so, I meet people at meetings, webinars, or, however, you just come across people, you meet them. And then in my database, I try to keep data on their qualities. Another thing is when I have a new client, I do an interview process to try to find out what is important to them. Some people they may have quite a bit of money, but they haven't had a lot of experience with investing, or I would say they haven't had good experience with it. And so just interviewing them and then providing examples and finding out about them, their needs. I mean, for example, they're saving for 12 years in the future when their kids are going to be through high school and they're going to need money for college. So I just find out about them and then help counsel them into the correct type of investment for their profile.
Have you had anyone come across your desk who you said, I don't want your money?
Yes.
Politely, should we say?
There's a lot of people that will go to one seminar or they'll pick up one book and they'll be looking for a return, and let's say it's a pretty hefty return, and then the first thing out of their mouth is, I want it to be very low risk. So they want a very low risk investment, but they want an unbelievable return.
Right.
So some of those people, you can counsel them and show them, well, the type of return that you want, let's get in the car and I'll go out and take you and show you that type of asset that has that kind of return. And then likewise, let's go out in the car and look at the less risky asset. And then they start to understand. Then there's some people that don't understand, and then those are the ones that perhaps we're not cut out to work with each other.
I think we all want to maximize the return and minimize the risk, but we have several jokes. I'm sure you have the same around your offices, and one of them is just because you read it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. There's so much fluff out there and so much information that's false. It's written by people to drive traffic, to make you click on things, to sell advertising, regardless of the product actually connected to it. So, Google seems a little bit better to me because it's got businesses. It doesn't have articles. But boy, those Facebook articles that come up, you'd think we'd all be millionaires at this point. I mean, they've got pictures of Lamborghinis and swimming pools and get rich quick. And just because you read it online doesn't mean it's the real way that it works. And it's kind of scary that, to me, that the consumer today is getting drawn to a cubicle that could be in another country trying to take their money instead of, and I won't even speak to myself, but instead of people like you or people like Pete in Houston or our other friends and colleagues in the business that have been doing this 30 years, that have a family in town, that are not going to disappear, that you can actually walk into their office and see them and see what you've built. I mean, your business is extremely successful. That doesn't come overnight. And we're not in the .com business, where you get funding from this angel investor and all of a sudden you hire 1,000 people and you look really important. That's just not the business that you and I are in. We're in this business where you kind of grind it out. And if you're lucky, you figure it out while you're grinding it out. And then that kind of builds over time. But I would say, that I've seen some of the same. We have folks that come in and I'll take the money off the table and put a different equation down. We had an interested client we've been going back and forth with a couple of weeks, and today he came in, well, not literally, but he brought to our attention that he wanted us to sign an agreement with a corporation who didn't own the property. He wanted us to take payment from a corporation who didn't own the property. And he started going down a list of things that we were going to do business with him. I know that's exactly what he wants. And I respect that that's what he wants. But the challenge is, if that was an option, everybody'd be delivering that to the table. There's a reason why these things don't materialize in the real world. And boy, if you find somebody that gives you all the answers you want, I would challenge that they're probably not advising you real well. You need to hear the bad, not just the good. If all they want to do is watch you sign the check, you should probably walk out the door and go somewhere else if you don't have a real clear understanding. These partnerships they last longer than a lot of marriages nowadays. So you really be better doing your diligence before you get into these. Pete last month was saying that, he really wished he had done a lot better job investigating his partners before he got into business with them, because it was harder to get out of business than it was to get divorced in Texas. But yeah, I agree with you. You really have to spend time with people and get to know them, and not just what they say, but spend a moment beyond that and find out who they're connected to and what they've done with their history, how they got to the table that day. And I really think it makes a world of difference, and it builds that rapport that you need to get honest answers and have a transparent conversation down the road. I feel that most of us now, a lot of people want to text and email, and that's great for documentation, but that's not building a relationship anymore. So I agree with you too. You got to sit down. You got to put them in the car. You got to drive them around. You got to show them. It's not just what I can put on a computer screen. It's what I can deliver to you, and that building is physically there. Now that's a tangible result. So we're doing pretty good on time today. 35 minutes in. We will wrap no matter what below an hour. But I think we're doing good where we're going to have some time for questions. And I want to make sure, if you get a chance, Steve, that you put your contact information, whatever the best is for you, whether it's your business main number or however that is, into the little strip on the right side of the screen. Do you see that on your screen so you could type that in at your leisure?
I don't. So I'm going to have to put these back on. So here we go.
Hey, I was going to put mine on earlier. I'm trying my best to look like I have good vision, but it's quickly going away. So there may be something on the right side of your screen. Let's see if I can.
My name. Is this?
Well, it's view chat. Is that on the bottom right?
Well, it's just a dialog box, but.
Try to click on that view chat. If it's a white box with a smiley face on the right side, and let's see if that for you opens up the side screen. I want to make sure, it's just really important that folks have time to get that information, write it down, make notes. If you guys are watching this today as a replay because you couldn't join it at lunch and you were working too hard, then we want to make sure that information is accessible to you as well. And if you want to share this with anybody and have any troubles, Crowdcast is the company that these are enabled through. They're the third party that works really well for this type of event. And they have a catalog, so you could search by 1836 would probably be the easiest keyword, and you'll find Steve on there. And goodness, if you ever need Steve's info, you can always reach out to us in Austin. We'll get you his contact info anytime. So the email is the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes. I'll leave a phone number too.
Yeah, why not? Maybe somebody actually wants to pick up a phone and talk to another human nowadays every once in a while. Let's make sure they have it just in case.
Right.
Perfect. So that's the office number. Perfect. So they'll be able to direct folks to wherever the best resource is, depending upon what their needs are. Steve has an extensive staff. So I would hope he's not answering the phones anymore for any reason, because he's got people to take care of everything and who really specialize in it. So guys, if you're watching today, you have any questions, feel free to post those on the side. I do have a couple questions at the bottom. We're going to make sure we answer before we get out of here. Steve, a couple more things. Tell us some lessons you've learned along the way, or some pitfalls, so that we can just share some nuggets of information with folks.
I've learned a lot of lessons.
Sorry. You want to take a moment and come back to it? I didn't mean to put you on the spot with it.
No, that's fine. I mean, I've many different lessons. I guess one is to do the proper due diligence. Don't get so enamored with the property or with something of the asset, or you just have to do a deal that you don't do the proper due diligence. And, just don't let your emotions get carried away with you. I mean, review the numbers, look at the physical condition of the property, look into the city itself, what are the growth prospects? So I would just encourage people to get that team together and then go forward with due diligence. And it'll cost money on the commercial side to do the proper due diligence. And don't be afraid to walk away from that money if the deal doesn't hold water.
Yeah, I agree with you. No matter if you're buying a house, commercial property, whether you're buying a vehicle, just because you invested a little bit of money to get it checked out, boy, if it's a lemon, you'll be really happy you walked away. So we'll make sure we get some answers to these other questions as well. Any common questions you get from your clients that you can just answer now for the whole bulk of people and save them some time?
Well, I see a little question that came up on my screen here. It says, can you talk a little bit more about how to get involved in a consortium? Where do you find that information?
Perfect.
What I would say is go to different investment meetings. You know, in almost every city, there's RIA meetings, and a lot of people will hang out at those meetings that have particular deals. But you do, like Matt, you were saying earlier, you need to check into the people. I mean, you know, you're buying real estate, but really the important thing is the people behind it. And so, you know, you want to, do they have integrity? You know, what is their track record? You know, frankly, do you enjoy them? I mean, they might have a great track record, but you know, they may just turn you off. And so, you know, this is going to be something that you're going to be married to for a while. So you want to enjoy it. You want to have fun with it. So I would say get involved with different investment groups, ask around, ask your friends, you know, that especially if you have friends that are in real estate and they seem to have been successful, ask them what was the vehicle, you know, that they got to get into the deal.
Going on and off. If they're in another city, not so they reach out to you for
And now I was having a little trouble with the internet connection, kind of got a little bad there. But I think what you're asking is, if somebody's in another city, are there some referrals? And you bet. I mean, I have SVN brethren all across the country. And so if you're in a particular city and you want to invest, then I can certainly refer you to a broker. If you're buying the asset yourself, I mean by yourself, you're going to not do it in a group. I would say it is best to buy that asset in your own hometown. But if you're investing in a syndication, I would say that that's less important. And frankly, you may be in a city that it doesn't make sense to invest in at this point. For example, real estate cycles hit, you know, across the country. And so a lot of investing is timing. And so you may not want to invest, or your market may be small so that it doesn't have sufficient commercial assets. And I think that's one of the beauties of syndications is you can diversify geographically, you can diversify across product type, and then you can also diversify your money even, you know, let's say you're investing with the same syndicator, but if he's coming out with products on a regular basis, you can invest smaller amounts of money so that you have your investment capital diversified over a wider product and geography. So again, I think a real positive thing on syndications.
You know, if you do your diligence on people such as yourself, Steve, from the consumer standpoint, I just can't help personally but to feel better about having an asset behind the money. I mean, I love my Edward Jones guy and all that, but he's giving that money to somebody that I'll never see and investing in things that I don't even know. And it sounds nice. And then where's the asset? So to me, even all things being equal, I would take a hard asset any day over smoke and mirrors. You're investing with a lot of these people yourself, are you not?
Yes, that's correct. Right. So, I mean, I have some assets that I own myself, but I mean, frankly, I love investing with people. I mean, I've been married to the same woman for 35 years, and I've had some very good partners for upwards of 30 years. So it's been a vehicle that I've utilized a lot. I mean, the things that I'm preaching, I follow myself. I mean, I like diversifying my own assets. So yes, I have lots of partners, and it's a vehicle that I use personally.
Good deal. So one of the follow-up questions here was Roger was asking about a REA meeting. You were telling him to go to some of the local meetings. Could you just clarify that for him?
Well, in almost every market, if you look around, there are local groups that get together. And so, for example, on the single family side, there are tons of them. And in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's, gosh, I can think of probably 3 or 4 of them. And some of them refer to them as our RIA groups, but if you, guess Matt, in your area, how would you find those? I mean, I'm on so many different listservs with real estate that I'm pounded with them, but if you're not involved in real estate.
So my challenge is with some of those, and I'm not speaking to the commercial side because, I would say for any of our viewers today, based on Steve's stats, on his actions, his behavior, not on whether I like Steve, I don't like Steve. If you find somebody that's got multi-state experience, partners across the nation, is so stable that they've been doing this 30 years, I feel really good about giving them some money. My gut tells me these people aren't going to disappear and go hide out, right? But some of these groups in Austin, I know they've got some smart people in them, but the groups are making money off feeding people hope. And it's really disturbing to me. We went to a few of them years ago to see if we could support them, if we could speak at them, if we could help educate investors. And we really felt like the groups were selling hope, not resources, not experience, not a rate of return, not something you could count on. And so I'm a little disheartened on the residential side. I really feel like people that have been in the business a very long time, like yourself, you would just as soon look at somebody and go, you know what, you don't have to do business with me because I'm happy. My home life is good. I spend money wisely, and if you want to, great. But some of these guys are just, I feel like they're out to take advantage. So I feel like the consumer will see that when they go to some of these groups. If they're hard pitching you something or trying to get you in the corner and force you to join something else or pay, I just really question it, because those of us that are in this business for the long haul would just never treat anybody that way. We either deliver a quality product or we figure out how. We just don't do it another way. So, I don't know if that answered your question to help people in Austin, but I wish I'm not as good on the commercial side, and that's why we have you on today, because you're that commercial expert. So I know Fort Worth and DFW has got some probably great groups and connected with your guys across the nation, great people. But boy, I wish the buyer would beware a little bit out there, that when they go to these rah-rah meetings, they don't start handing over cash to people that are not in it for the right reasons.
Well, and I agree with you, Matt. I'll tell you, if somebody sends me an email or calls me and they want somebody in their local area, I'll do what I can through my contacts to find, 2 or 3 good prospects. And I agree, that's probably better than going to a meeting and then not knowing at the meeting what's going to happen. I see another question there as far as the minimum investment.
Perfect.
In our investments, the minimum that we have is $50,000 per share. And that will vary. I would say that's probably on the lower end of it. There might be some that would take 25,000, and it's frankly, I have the latitude to take 25,000, and I would potentially do it. But a circumstance where I wouldn't do it is if that $25,000 was somebody's only $25,000. I mean, that's probably too early to be investing if it, at least on the commercial side.
Not sure if the audience can stay with us at this time. Rate of return. Everybody's going to want to know what kind of money you can get. What do you think is a healthy range? Now, obviously, the risk varies with that rate. What do you think?
A little bit of connectivity issue there, but you're asking about rates of return and what is an expectation, I think.
Yes, sir.
In the syndication world, typically the way that's set up is there's a preferred return. And so the investors that are putting up the equity after the expenses of the property and the debt service, they have a priority on the return after that. And so it's referred to as a preferred return. And the deals that I'm seeing right now, those are typically in the 6 to 8% range. Back when cap rates were higher and returns were higher, well, preferred rates of return were higher at that time as well. But with as much money as flooded into the market, the returns have come down. So the preferred returns that I see are 6 to 8%. Then what you're also, as a commercial investor, hoping for and looking for is the end or the residual when the property is either sold or maybe in the future when the property is refinanced. And then there should be another distribution at the end, certainly upon sale. And then that gets into what's called an internal rate of return. When you look at what you received on a current basis plus what you received at the end, and then you can calculate an internal rate of return. And currently, the deals that I see, those internal rates of return are a floor of, say, 10%, 10 to 12%. And, we love to get into the teens, but that's, in this investment market, that is a little challenging. And I also say that if you are seeing returns that are double-digit returns, I would really, really look carefully at the assumptions, because that in our market, a double-digit return is extremely difficult to come by.
Yeah, and kind of should be. If everybody's making that rate of return, that you really need to be discerning with the details on it. So a couple other questions, and we'll wrap it up today. 10 more minutes is our max time. How long do you typically hold properties? And then this gentleman, Ruben, is asking about value add. Is it different? I think you kind of covered that in your last answer.
Back to the holding period, to me, that depends on the asset that I found. And so I try to do a good job of marrying the investors to that. So, personally, I'm a long-term investor, so I love finding a good asset and holding it the long term. But most of the syndications that we do, it is best to have an idea of a predetermined, end date. So we've done deals where that end date has been, in the 3 to 5 year horizon, and then we've done some where the end date is more in a 7 to 10 year horizon. So give me just a second.
Certainly. I know after an hour, it's a little tough to sit still.
That's okay. My allergies are bothering me here in South Carolina. So anyway, so let's see. So again, our holding period is strictly rated to the asset, but we communicate it very well. I mean, you cannot invest with us and not know what the expected holding date is for an asset. Now, that holding period can vary. I mean, for an example, a good example of that is, let's say that we're doing a value add property, and we are saying that because of the timing in the marketplace and what we need to do with the asset, that we are expecting the time horizon to be 5 to 7 years. If we're able to accomplish things with that property in 24 months, or if the economy changed for the better in 24 or 36 months, where we can still exit and get a similar return or better than what we could do by holding the property 5 or 7 years, well, we have the latitude as the manager to change that holding period. And that would be an example of where we would do that.
Very nice. I think I just saw one more question that was kind of before we got started today. It was by Lance. He said, excuse me, do I need a real estate license to buy and sell properties? Steve, I'll let you answer that.
The answer is no, not for residential or commercial. No license at all required to buy or sell real estate.
For yourself?
That's correct, right, yeah. If you receive a commission from the sale of a real estate, then you are required to have a license.
Absolutely, yeah. Texas Real Estate Commission really likes to make sure people stay on top of that. They're a little bit particular about how we do business in our state. So, Steve, I can't tell you how much I just appreciate you joining us today, how much I really respect what you've accomplished in Fort Worth, DFW. Guys, if you just want some advice, Steve has shared his email on here. He may not be the one that gets back to everybody because there's only so many hours in the day, but he has people across his entire office that are specialists. And so if you have questions, ask the questions. Get in touch with them. Let them know what your questions are, what your goals are, and just have a conversation. Don't feel like somebody's going to put you on the spot and ask you for money because you just want some information. That's how relationships start. So whether you're looking for residential, he's got Frontline Property Management. They are superb. They're in Fort Worth. His offices are centrally located too, just kind of right off of downtown Fort Worth. And if you haven't been lately, boy, Fort Worth is cute. I mean, they've really done a good job with downtown, jogging trails. It's walkable. I recommend you go. And then for the commercial side, obviously, just let Steve know what you need, even if it's a conversation, he can take care of you. And then I'm going to take a guess at this last question and we'll wrap it up. So does a syndicate or consortium own multiple different properties? The answer is yes, right? That's what it kind of bulks properties together. It doesn't have to. You could buy one big one, but it kind of bulks them as well to whatever that portfolio is. How far off am I, Steve?
Well, the deals that I do, they're one-off. So we'll find one property and we'll raise money for that one property. What you're referring to with owning multiple properties, that's generally referred to as a blind pool. And so on a blind pool, I will say I'm going to purchase retail properties. And these retail properties are going to be in the Sun Belt. And they're going to have these particular parameters. And so I don't know which ones I'm going to buy, but that's the plan. And I'll raise the money and then I'll go out and purchase them. So that's not the way I operate, but there are some people that operate that way. With me, I have a specific asset. And so you're investing in one asset when you invest your money with me. So.
Are you still blocking residential properties? It seems like we had talked about that one time. You had groups of residential properties, or maybe it was just the SVN that had access to something like that.
Well, SVN right now, they're huge as far as large portfolios of single family. And we have sold lots of single family. We manage a lot of single family. And I had considered putting together a consortium to purchase single family. But the timing right now, in my opinion, is not good. It's so hard to find the deals. So it's just more a matter of a timing issue. And then multifamily.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Career, early 90s, we purchased, literally thousands of apartments units. And so I love multifamily, but again, just the market cycle is not conducive for that right now.
I agree with you. I feel the same thing, everything we look at. So we'll wrap it up there. Really appreciate you guys. I think you've got Steve's contact information. I'll pop my email in there as well, just so you guys have it handy and you don't have to search for it. We'll be back with you next month. I think it looks like October 3rd. Scott Royal Smith. I didn't know this, Steve, but you actually have to use your name in the state of Texas in the naming of a legal business, like an attorney. So since his middle name is Royal, he gets to call it Royal Legal Solutions. They kind of got around that when he got lucky. We're going to talk legal next month. And again, reach out to Steve. Let him know what your questions are. Anything in Fort Worth, anything in Dallas. If you're looking at a commercial, he's out of state right now. He's out there hitting the streets and beating the bushes. So let him know what you want, and he'll find it for you. And he's a great guy. So, Steve, anything else we can do for you today?
No, Matt. I just thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it, and we need to look each other up and get together again. So
hopefully I get lucky. Maybe your schedule will change. I get to see you in Fort Worth next weekend. But if not, I look forward to the next time we cross paths.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Matt.
Have a great day, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next month.